friends, the Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus again, in reply, spoke to the chief priests and the elders of the people in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. He dispatched his servants to summon the invited guests to the feast, but they refused to come. A second time, he sent other servants, saying, 'Tell those invited, behold, I have prepared my banquet. My calves and fatted cattle are killed, and everything is ready. Come to the feast.' Some ignored the invitation and went away, one to his farm, another to his business. The rest laid hold of his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged and sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The feast is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy to come. Go out, therefore, into the main roads and invite to the feast whomever you find.' The servants went out into the streets and gathered all they found, good and bad alike, and the hall was filled with guests." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, good morning, everyone. Enjoy the sunshine. I'd like to take just a quick moment to thank you for all your prayers and expressions of sympathy for me and my family at my brother's passing. And I would like to ask you to continue to keep my brother's widow in your prayers, if you would, please. Last July, Nancy and I booked tickets to go on the train to Florida on September 13th to visit my mom. My mom, on the 16th, celebrated her 101st birthday. Hurricane Irma devastated the Caribbean and wreaked havoc in Florida and Georgia. And Amtrak, of course, canceled our tickets. So we hastily made arrangements to drive, not knowing what we would find when we got there. So we loaded up and took tools and a generator and other things as we went into the unknown. Mom's place, by the grace of God, survived with major landscaping damage, but no structural damage to the house. And they got their power back in only 2 days. But hundreds of thousands in Florida were not at rest. And I'm going to take a break for a minute, but I'm going to come back to my mom in a minute. For the last 3 weeks, the church has given us parables from the Gospel of Matthew. And they come one right after the other in the Gospel. And they are all related. They're lessons given to the people and to temple officials and the elders of the community, the leaders. They were meant to be encouragement, but also admonishment and warning. If you remember, 2 weeks ago, we heard Jesus ask of the chief priests and elders, "What is your opinion? A man had 2 sons, and he told them to go and work in his vineyard. And one said, 'No, I won't go,' but later changed his mind. And the other said, 'I'll go,' but then did not. And he said, 'Which of the sons did what the father wanted?' And then after they gave their answer, Jesus came back and said, 'I say to you, the tax collectors and prostitutes will enter the kingdom of heaven before you.' Last week, we were told of a landowner who leased his vineyard out and then had a little trouble collecting his rent. You see, the leasees grabbed his servants, the leaseors, the people who rented his land, seized his servants, and they beat and killed them. They even killed his son. And so Jesus asked, what will the owner of the vineyard do to those tenants when he comes? And after their reply, he said, I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people that will produce its fruit. This week, we hear of a king who prepares a wedding feast. The invited guests were too busy. They ignored the king and killed his servants. The king was justifiably enraged and passed sentence on those who were deemed not worthy. And then the servants went out into the streets and gathered all they found, the good and the bad. And the hall was filled with guests. These parables are clearly a warning to those who hold both civil and religious authority or power. They are easily brought from the time of Jesus to the present day and are a warning to us, those who are in religious and civil authority. You see, today we are still abusing God's servants. We're still killing his son. So we must ask ourselves, who are the true sons and daughters of God? Who are the people who will produce the fruit? Who will finally be chosen to come to the banquet? Now, I'm not really condemning all political and religious leaders. That's not the case at all. But let me go back to the beginning of my story and my time in Florida. My mom and my sister lived just a little ways from Fort Myers, and they did not evacuate. They were invited to stay with a couple from their church who they thought maybe had a slightly more substantial home, and they went there on the Friday before the storm hit. Irma made landfall, and the four of them spent 2 days eating the prepared casseroles and playing cards by flashlight. We arrived on Thursday after the storm, after 3 incredibly long days of travel. You see, in Virginia, the traffic started to get bad, and by the Carolinas, it kind of reminded me of New York City in rush hour. The Georgia State Police had closed 12 exits on I-95 because there simply was no gasoline available anywhere near the exits, and they just wouldn't let people off the highway. By the time we hit Jacksonville, near the northern border of Florida, the electric was very spotty in all kinds of places. There were no traffic lights at about half of the intersections on those Florida highways that any of you who have traveled there, they're kind of weird. Their DOT had taken some precautions and put up stop signs on the 4-lane highways. Imagine what that was like. We were really worried about what we would find when we finally got there. My mom and my sister had been back home since Monday. And for them, they had power and telephone and even cable service in their area. But as I said, not all were that graced. There was widespread destruction in the city very adjacent to their little subdevelopment. We witnessed and we read about the slow reactions of officials. We read about looters and price gouging, and even about one large suburban church who refused to open their doors to the people whose homes were flooded or destroyed. They changed their mind after that story hit the papers. We also witnessed sons and daughters who did their father's will, who were worthy of the banquet, who produced fruit. When my mom and sister arrived back home, there were several large branches. I don't know if you're familiar with live oak trees. The large branches are not this big. They're this big in Florida. Several large branches that were down on their property. They had no access to the driveway. Were parking in the street. Things were a mess. They could get into the house. But within a couple of hours, there were 2 high school kids and their dad who came down the street and were clearing the major debris from neighbors' homes, hauling it to the curb. They refused money for their work. And they were helping all of the neighbors up and down the street. While we were there, there was a man living in the office of the Church of the Good Shepherd for over a week because his mobile home was not fit for him to live in. The local Winn-Dixie grocery store brought in tractor-trailer loads of bottled water and passed them out 1 or 2 cases at a time to those people who had no power or water. A whole truckload would be gone in a matter of hours. We read about restaurants and caterers who were preparing and giving away thousands of meals for free. We saw utility trucks from as far away as Illinois and Ontario, Canada, coming down and working long, long hours to put the power and utilities back together in Florida. We witnessed massive destruction and misery. But we also saw hope and help, and we saw Jesus. Now, in literature, an author will often repeat a sentence or a theme to stress its importance. This week we heard the 3rd parable from Matthew on the same theme. They come one right after the other in the gospel, and so it must have been very important for Matthew to give it a three-peat. So as you think about those parables, here are some things that I would like all of us to ponder this week. As a son or a daughter, do I refuse the call and then rethink it? Or do I say yes and then turn away? Am I the tenant who produces the fruit at the proper time? God has a banquet prepared. Everything is ready. Am I ready for the feast? Am I worthy? Can I sit down and share with the other guests that are there? The guests who are the good and the bad? The guests who are a tax collector or maybe even a prostitute?